Okay, Chris, whenever you're ready.
Wonderful. All right, well, in the interest of time, let's dive right into it. I would like to go ahead and call this meeting to order and get a confirmation of quorum. For those of you joining us live on YouTube video, welcome to the Planning Board for our May 20th meeting. Where does time go? But yeah, let's go ahead and call to order and have a quorum. Call. Thing.
Okay, so I will call the roll. Folks can just unmute themselves and let me know that they're present. That would be great. Chris Austin.
Present.
Frank Casadante is not here yet. Lisa Frazier.
Present.
Chris Johnston.
Present.
Elise Polly.
Present.
Jeff Scott and Hooper Schultz both let me know by email that they would not be available tonight. Jen Sykes.
Here.
And Scott Taylor.
Present.
Wonderful. All right.
That is 6 members, so that's a quorum even with our vacancy.
Perfect. That was going to be my next question. All right. So item 2, agenda changes and approval. Has everyone had an opportunity to look through the agenda, do a Control F, find their last name, and then see if there's anything you want to argue about?
That's the minutes.
Agenda minutes. That's the minutes. Sorry, I'm jumping ahead to 3. Has everyone looked at the agenda, and does anyone have any changes to make? No changes. Okay. So we need to get.
I'll record that as by consensus that the agenda was as printed.
Thumbs up as approval. Okay. Now the minutes. Does anyone have any minutes issues? Okay. There's a lot of them.
Not even me with all of my quotes in it.
Perfect. Okay. I take that as a win for the stenographer, right? Or, all right. Well, then
we do need a motion to approve them.
Move
Yep.
approve.
Move to approve. Anyone with a second?
Second.
Second was Scott Taylor. All right.
Chris Austin.
Aye.
Frank is not here. Lisa Frazier.
Oop, she muted her camera.
We'll come back to Lisa. Chris Johnston. Oh, I see it. Chris Johnston.
Aye.
Elise Polly.
Aye.
Jen Sykes.
Aye.
And Scott Taylor.
Aye.
Great, that's unanimous.
Perfect. All right. So if you take a quick gander on page 27 of our cover sheet for the staff, or for the planning board members, we're going to go ahead and jump right in with item 4A, the Johnson text amendments, the ADUs on private roads, and the reduced setbacks in the AR district. We spoke a little bit about this during the public hearing, and Margaret, if you'd like to give us a quick synopsis or any updates or anything along those lines.
Sure. I think you can see that Samantha, the applicant, is present, and so she's available to answer questions. This is a 2-part text amendment requested by a property owner. And so the first part is to allow accessory dwelling units on a private road. And then the second part is to reduce the setback in the AR district, which would apply, both actually apply townwide. There are not other tools available to allow this applicant to do what they want to do. So the option available to them is to ask to amend the Unified Development Ordinance. In terms of the accessory dwelling units on private roads, this is something that's been in the ordinance for a long time. Even when apartments were allowed inside every dwelling under the previous ordinance, there was a requirement for it to be on a public road, but the board has consistently been loosening up the regulations on accessory dwelling units to encourage more development. And then on the reduced setbacks in the agricultural residential district, this property is in a small section of the town that's zoned AR, like I think I said before, about 150 acres, where water and sewer is actually available, which means that there might be some more intense development on the parcels. And these lots were all developed long before there was zoning. And so there's a number of nonconformities going on in this particular neighborhood, but regardless, the AR district has 50-foot setbacks all the way around, which is significant. And even if the AR district actually contained, an active farm use under some state law provisions, active farm use in the ETJ is excused from many zoning provisions anyway. So I think that's probably a fair synopsis. I don't know if Sam has anything she'd like to add.
Sam, do you have anything?
I think you summed it up. Hey, y'all. That was a great synopsis. Thank you. Better than I could explain.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Okay. So we had our discussion before, but we need to get into it as a planning board. Does anyone have any feelings that they want to bring up right at the fore? Strong or otherwise? Jen?
I think the only thing I would suggest instead of what's proposed is the 30 all around, instead make it mirror R40, which would mean the front would be at 40 feet. Because it just seems odd to let AR, which is for bigger lots, for some of the bigger areas, just have a larger, a smaller setback than something that's a little more, that allows for a little more density. So I would just make it mirror what our 40 has instead of 30 all the way around.
Okay.
And I think my only other concern is, and I think there's a way around this, like was said, a lot of the private roads are owned by subdivisions and they're maintained to state standards. There are some in some areas in town that are not up to any kind of code. But I that's my main concern about the private road piece. I think, however, in order to up the density, they're going to have to fix the roads, or the roads are going to collapse under them. And so you hit that point where no one's going to want to do it if it's, you put an extra car on it and the car ends up in a sinkhole.
Right, and that was the concern I think that town board member Hughes was having, which was essentially, this isn't just for this particular lot that we're determining issues. This is, entire Hillsborough. So, when we make these changes, though it might work in Samantha's favor and that sort of thing, we do have to consider the other private roads and other considerations as well. So, just something to keep in mind for the board.
Well, I would just make the small point that there is a difference between a road that's in disrepair and whether or not certain services are provided on a private road. By and large, I know there was some discussion at the public hearing about school buses don't go down them, and by and large, mail carriers don't go down them, and some package deliveries won't, and so on and so forth. That is the nature of a private road. Especially when it's an unpaved private road in, a gravel road, as opposed to a private road in a townhome neighborhood that is paved and looks like a normal road. Us approving this or not approving this is going to have no impact on that. We cannot compel those other service providers to go down a private road if they don't feel like they should. And that's just sort of the way it is with private roads. It wasn't directly germane to the point, but I just wanted to clarify once again that, school buses, mail delivery, those folks are not going to go down private roads.
And I think the issue is just that, we have competing interests of, we want to increase density and that sort of thing, but we also don't want to increase how many people are now on a road that isn't being served by school buses or mail carriers or, all this other stuff as well.
Yeah, and the example I'm thinking of came out of a Board of Adjustment hearing where there is a private road. It has homes on it. Someone who bought adjacent properties, I think at first tried to build more densely on it, but there are limits to what that road can accommodate. And that's where the solution isn't going to be governmental, and that's more of the edge case than the norm with private roads. The economic pressures will probably be the limiting factor for that developer who does like to build and does like to increase density, but you've got to, and it's what Margaret said, it's a road in disrepair almost on that private road. And that's going to be the limiting factor. And again, it's not the bulk of what's going on in town.
Okay.
The address to this property again, or this location?
This location is on Burnside Drive. I don't think we mentioned that prior, but it's on Burnside Drive. The situation Jen is talking about, I think, is a private road off of Nash Street.
It is, yeah.
Oops, sorry. The private road off of Burnside Drive. It's also somewhat at the corner of South Cameron Avenue, which I guess is a public road. Now, there are 2 lots that it was a 10-acre lot that they subdivided recently. And so we're, I guess, 1 lot over from that corner of Burnside Drive, the private road, as well as South Cameron, the public road. So it's, within about a 2-minute, a minute and a half walking distance to a public road. I don't know if that makes a big difference or anything, but it's not really far off the beaten path, I guess you could say.
And I know we have to consider the whole city together, not just our own situation. And I don't know if it's too late to ask if maybe we can just add language to the provision saying like to be considered on an individual basis based on the condition of the private road. If the board is not comfortable making the change for everything, I don't know if that's an option.
Or maybe a certain a certain amount of proximity to a public road.
Yeah.
So instead of 6 miles down a private road with a questionable road that could be in disrepair, maybe within whatever parameter y'all are the experts on this, see fit, within half a mile, a quarter mile of a public road. I mean, we're probably about 300 yards, if even that, 200 yards from a well-served public road.
Yeah, or the disrepair piece. And I think I asked that question, and I don't remember if there was an answer about how to handle the disrepair issue.
Right. Planning board member Austin, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide kind of my feelings on it. I thought about it after the last meeting, specifically kind of what Commissioner Hughes spoke to. He made a couple points that, having postal service and school bus service and all those services were kind of what he thought were, cornerstone of democracy. I would argue that the cornerstone of what we want is to kind of live the way we prefer, and people have the choice to do that. I would also say he made a point that we're trying to have an equitable town, and I agree with that. I think if I remember correctly, this particular request was for age in place for a family member, which I think is also part of the equity discussion as the demographics shift to older people. Aging in place is something that we should consider, I think. And I think the board saying that we're going to disapprove of where people can provide dwellings because we're not comfortable with the amount of government service, I think just goes against my personal beliefs. So that's where I'm coming from.
I appreciate your input, planning board member Austin. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
The mailbox for the property is on actually South Cameron Avenue. It is on a publicly served road.
Right.
Just throwing that out there. I meant to add that.
And we have trash service and school bus service there. Just
on,
throwing that in there.
On that public service road right there, but near the property. Just throwing that out there. Thanks, John.
Also, the point that it affects the entire town, which I realized. So.
Right, and that comes back to, so Margaret, to confirm, we're not able to put in any kind of language saying on a case-by-case basis or anything along those lines. This would be one of those things where, what kind of language could we have that would, that feels like a one-off kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm gonna defer to Bob about that. There is not a requirement that private roads be constructed per se until there's a certain number of houses on them. This request is coming from, and just so that everybody knows, the person on the telephone is Frank Casadante, so he's here.
Hey, Frank.
Just folks on YouTube probably can't see him, but just want to be clear. So that's something that we could implement, is to say that at the point, maybe somebody asked to put a accessory dwelling unit in, or any other number of things that the board wanted to specify, because every now and then we do get a request for an extra house on a private road. When we had waivers, we could require that it actually be constructed. Now that's going to last for a period of time, because we can't constantly inspect private roads and ensure that they're constructed. Burnside Drive is an unusual situation because it is a private road that predates everything. It predated zoning. So, I mean, it is one of our best constructed private roads. And I believe we do provide trash service on that one private road, due to tradition. And, normally we wouldn't go down a private road. So that's a whole nother discussion outside of the realm of this board. But I think we would be rather limited on what we could craft in terms of a condition, other than just saying that the private road would need to be constructed. And I'll see if Bob has anything he wants to add.
Well, I don't think we can have a case-by-case situation. I mean, that's almost the same thing as having a special use permit. And I just don't think that'll work. I think you probably could create a text amendment that requires the road to be constructed, or saying that you can only have the road, the ADUs or the setbacks reduced within a certain distance in the AR district on a private road, within a fixed certain distance of a improved public road. You probably can do that, because you're establishing a standard that is either you meet it or you don't. There's no discretion. Now, I'm not recommending that you do that, but I think that that's something that the town could do in the UDO.
And I will just add that a fixed distance that's specified exactly how we measure it would be much, much easier for staff to enforce,
Right.
Going forward, than something about the quality of the road.
Okay.
What are the cons of allowing it?
I mean, from my perspective, it's begging the question of some more private property disputes, things that the town cannot intervene in and can't solve. So if the homeowner on the very end of a private road, or let's say the two houses at the very end of private roads both put in accessory dwelling units, and they're running more and more people up and down the private road than the other two homeowners on the private road, that private road agreement may not address who has to pay how much for maintaining that road to represent the actual use. But I mean, you're going to run into that on any private road situation. If the person at the end of the private road has a large family and has 3 teenagers or something else, and the people closest to the public road live alone and there's only one car, and there's that whole, but that's all a private issue that is not the town's purview or job to resolve. We often get it. Property owners attempt to bring us into many of those situations, but at the end of the day, it's a private property dispute and it's not the town's issue. But we do try to write our ordinances to make neighbors happy with one another. So I'm welcome others to put in things that they think are challenges or risks, but that's the primary one I see.
Wasn't Stephanie Trueblood, wasn't she talking about minimizing or relaxing the frontal setbacks when she was coming up with her new plan as far as development?
From a commercial standpoint, absolutely, to try and make some adjustments to that. I think that conversation was a little bit more about front setbacks in commercial development, but we have also seen a great change in the setback that new neighborhoods propose under special use permits. So Forest Ridge, Collins Ridge, Fiore Hill all have significantly smaller setbacks than our traditional zoning districts. And that's, you know, a tool that's available to them under the conditional use, the special use permit process, that isn't available if you acquire 20 acres that are zoned R20. You just have to go with the standard setbacks as specified in the ordinance, and you don't bring that flexibility in by going through the special use permit process. I'll tell you that staff is really not excited about private roads in general, but that's a little bit more about townhomes, and just the concern about the long-term maintenance of private roads. And again, that's just an issue that homeowners often attempt to draw the town into solving their private property disputes. And it just doesn't feel great as a staff member to say, sorry, that's your problem, I can't help you. When you've got neighbors who really just cannot and will not talk to one another.
Well, if they had their setbacks a lot closer, then maybe they could talk a little more easily.
Okay.
Valid point.
All right. Does anyone else have any input on, so do we have strong feelings? Does anyone have strong feelings about the setbacks in the AR? Does anyone not like Jen Sykes's proposal of changing it to the R40, or do they want to go ahead and strong feelings?
I know Elise has her hand up in the chat thingy.
Oh, I apologize, Elise. I don't have the chat thingy up on my side.
Fine. I was just going to say that the same thought came to mind for me with regard to the setbacks. So really wanting it to mirror R40 so that it'd be 30-30-40 rather than 30-30-30, just because I think it just makes sense for that to be the case. In terms of the accessory units and this requirement for the lot having direct access to a public street, I know we're talking about trying to prepare Hillsborough for smart development and for infill and all these, and we're trying to be more open to having more density. And I think with that in mind, that it makes sense to consider getting rid of that requirement. So that's sort of the direction I'm leading. I don't have as strong of a feeling about that as I do about just making sure that that zoning of AR matches R40. But those are a couple of the thoughts that came to mind for me.
And Board Member Sykes?
I think the big thing is, even though the town is pushing for infill, the challenge is some of these roads are really old. And so that's where I would want to do just something to get at that quality of a road question. Be it, you gotta be within however many feet of a public, or you have to have it under construction. It's just because of where a lot of that infill is probably going to be targeted. You are going to have some decrepit roads, and if they're all private and the town doesn't want to season, rightfully so, there's got to be some mechanism to not put the cars going down the road at risk. And I do not, if there's a way to say it with, it's gotta be up to a code which doesn't seem optimal, or it's gotta be within 25 feet of a public, that's fine. Because you wanna hit that goal, but the one risk you have in a historic town is historic roads. And not meaning like Colonial Williamsburg style historic of cobblestones, more than nobody's maintained it since 1935.
Town Attorney Bob.
I was wondering, Margaret, we were talking about infill. How much AR zoning do we have that would be considered infill suitable? Most of the AR stuff is out in the outskirts, isn't it?
Correct.
So
And
we're
that's
not going to have
where,
it. We're not going to have infill development with AR zoning, at least not typically.
right, there's only about 150 acres that's zoned AR that's in town where water and sewer is available. And it's all basically on Burnside Drive. Others are likely to be, I'm looking at my zoning map, others are likely to be rezoned to something else. Overall, we have about 800 acres in the zoning jurisdiction, but a good chunk of that is the mine. So when that redevelops, it'll change. A good chunk of it is in some kind of preservation trust, so that's never going to develop. The rezoning aspect of this, or the setback aspect of this, gives me no concern whatsoever. I don't think it poses any challenge, and doesn't open us to any sort of risk at all. I'm doing some quick measurements on the length of private roads while you guys talk, so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we can though to her. Do we want to, can we, Bob, you can answer this while Margaret's looking. Can we do a motion in parts to cover the setback piece first and then fill in the private road, or does it all have to be in one because it's the same item?
No, I mean, you're making a recommendation to the town board, so you can do it in as many motions as you would like, Jen.
I was going to say, if we want to let Margaret look the other stuff up, and we can, Elise and I seem to be on the same page about the AR match in R40, if anyone else has opinions.
Does anyone else have opinions on the AR40 match? Frank?
I wish I could. I'm really dead in the water.
Okay.
I'm
That's
scrambling to
perfect.
try to actually get another machine out of mothballs, get into this meeting.
That's
So-
fine. We just appreciate your presence. All right, so hearing no dissension on the AR40 matchup, can I have a motion?
If that, to begin this item, we change the setback limits to 30 on the side, 30 on the rear, and 40 on the front for AR.
Okay, so motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Chris Austin.
Okay, Chris Austin,
Aye.
Frank Casadante,
Aye.
Lisa Frazier,
Aye.
Chris Johnston,
Aye.
Elise Polly,
Aye.
Jen Sykes,
Aye.
Scott Taylor,
Aye.
and
Okay.
that is unanimous.
Perfect. All right, so then we are back to the accessory dwellings with private roads. So in the intervening 2 minutes, have we made any strong determinations? I feel like I have a general sense from Chris Austin. Frank, were you chiming in there?
No.
Okay, all right. Lisa, do you have any strong feelings?
No.
Okay. Scott, where have you kind of weighed in? Okay. And Elise?
Pretty much what I had said before. I mean, we're still talking about the private road issue.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I'm leaning towards dropping part B of that language, the existing language. I definitely hear what Jen's saying about historic roads in a historic town. But I'm not sure what sort of options there are to kind of get around that. The other thing that stood out to me, Margaret, when you were speaking about the AR parts of town, is that you said it was mostly Burnside Drive. So then if we change this, I guess I'm wondering how many roads are there that are within town limits that are not on a public road. Like, I'm trying to figure out, everything we do within this applies to the whole town, but then I'm trying to actually zero in and see, but really, what does it really possibly apply to? So I'm just trying to unpack what you were saying there with the Burnside Drive comment. And because on one hand, we're talking about the zoning and the AR and making it that, so I feel like that's where you mentioned that, but then I was trying to see if there were any implications about that to this other discussion around dropping the Part B of.
Sure. So the public road thing would apply to any person with an accessory, and right now we have it as accessory units within a principal dwelling. So the freestanding ones are set aside. They're still not allowed when they're on a private road. And I'll tell you, the vast majority of people want the freestanding accessory dwelling unit. They don't want it attached to their house. So another requirement we have for accessory dwelling units is that they must have water and sewer service. So that doesn't insist that they're inside the city limits, but it greatly increases the likelihood that they're inside the city limits. So it doesn't capture some of the old private roads that are out in the ETJ, because those tend not to have water and sewer service. I don't have a good handle on how many private streets we had, but while you were discussing, I went out and did some math, did some measurements on the GIS to provide what the applicant is looking for. If we said the distance from the private road to the driveway to the parcel containing the accessory dwelling unit. So not to the dwelling unit itself, but to the driveway, because what happens on their property is their business. It would have to be 300 feet to capture what they want to do. A lot of our private roads aren't a whole lot more than 300 feet long. So this would capture, if we went that way, it would capture more of the private roads than it excluded, because most of our private roads in town, outside of a townhome neighborhood, are short. They're less than 500 feet, and there's fire code reasons for that. So honestly, after doing that, I'm not sure that it's worthwhile putting a distance limit on it. It seems like it's either an all or nothing. Either leave it in or take it out. And you know, again, this is the problems that are created are for the residents of that private road to resolve, not the government.
Hopefully market forces will, I was thinking in my head, maybe we can put in, and don't have potholes in it. That's like the easiest to enforce condition I can think of. Yeah, it sounds like there's not, unless you say something about, and there's no code restrictions for private roads, are there? Yeah. Newly built, they have to meet some kind of state standard, but not the historic ones.
Well, they meet a basic passability standard, but it's not something that's easy to verify once the road is in place, because it's about, you know, how deep is the rock and so forth. Well, how are we going to enforce that? We can't go out. We don't have probes that, you know, give us that you run a camera on to look down and see what size the rock is. I mean, it's an unenforceable standard to talk about the standard. And at the end of the day, it's what are the homeowners on that road willing to stand?
Well, but also to the point of, you know, we have fire trucks and ambulances and garbage. Well, I guess the garbage trucks run down Burnside, but no, they don't run down Burnside.
Well, I think they do, but they don't run down any other private road.
Right. So let's say an ambulance comes through and it has to run through a private road and it's not maintained or anything like that. I guess it's the same thing as if an ambulance had to run through a townhome neighborhood or whatever, but you're shaking your head. What is shaking your head?
Well, I mean, they're either gonna drive in or they won't. You know, the ambulance driver has the right to choose whether they think they've got enough room to get their equipment, whether the path is clear enough. I've heard many a complaint that many of the private roads out in the county, again, this is out in the county, not ours, you know, don't get cleared. You know, when it's a Toyota driving down that private road every day to get to the house at the end of it, that's a whole lot different than trying to take an ambulance down that private road. And, you know, the statement of, you know, truck trimming, trucks do a great job of trimming trees. And honestly, the emergency service providers are really torn. Do they tear up their vehicles, or do they risk being sued for not coming in time? And it's a terrible place to put them. Our private roads are not in that circumstance, but over time, if somebody is a frequent flyer, the drivers will determine whether or not they're going to drive down that private road if it's just a disaster.
So that's the contention here is, do we open ourselves up to additional units in an area where they still need some government services, even if it's a private road or that sort of thing, via ambulance or fire truck or whatever the case may be, and we have no leverage to be able to say X, Y, or Z. We want people to be able to do what they need to do or what they want to do on their property, but we still, as a town, have responsibilities, and we have responsibilities to our services to make sure that they have the ability to do X, Y, and Z. I guess that's my big struggle, is that, with these private roads, we're opening ourselves up to more densification in those areas that we don't have a whole lot of control over, leverage, that kind of thing, for these kind of things. So that's my struggle.
I kind of look at it this way. If you're gonna, this is the example before us is aging in place, but I'm, again, just kind of knowing some of the context with that one on Nash and hearing it adjustment and the description of the road being like in disrepair. No one's gonna want to rent the accessory dwelling unit if they're afraid they're gonna lose the bottom of their car driving down a road each day. The economic pressure might curb some of that issue or force the road improvement. But again, that's not for government to deal with because they don't want to pay, or the government don't want to pay to take it over. And I think it's one or two cars potentially on some of these. I would much prefer a more elegant solution to get the roads up to code. But if there isn't one, again, the bulk of these are in areas where the private roads are townhomes or subdivisions. They're already pretty much up.
Okay. Does anyone have any new information, or do we need to go ahead and make some sort of suggestion or table it until we have more information, or where do we want to land on this? Who's bold and brave tonight on the motioning? Okay. Do we feel like we need more information in regards to how many private roads we're talking, or? Anyone?
I mean, I think
Okay.
Margaret can give us this number off the top of her head. It's like 90% of these private roads would be in townhome in subdivisions, right? Where they're pretty much well maintained.
Jen, we really need you to speak up. I can't hear.
Sorry.
You said 90% of these private roads are what?
I'm just trying to ballpark the number of the private roads that are in subdivisions versus the ones that are at high risk of being riddled with potholes and off the old trading path.
Well, they're all in subdivisions. That's how they're created as private roads. Do you mean like townhome neighborhoods where they're paved?
Yeah, paved is a good way to, just using that criteria.
Certainly the longest ones are. Let's see. I'm thinking that there's maybe, I wouldn't say the majority of them are paved or
okay,
really robustly improved. But I would honestly say, because I think I know which road you're talking about. You're talking about Mason Payne Road.
Yep.
And that was basically a driveway.
Yes.
Where someone has platted a private road over top of it. So it served two houses. It's continuing to serve two houses. Yeah. That's really all that's going on.
Well, and there's another one down somewhere in the west side as well, but I think that one's actually paved, though I've been down it once and boy, is it tight.
So very, very few of the vast majority of them are new. So if there is 24 private roads outside of paved townhome neighborhoods. If there's 24 private roads, I would say less than a third of them are old.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
vast majority of them are new, recently created, probably not more than 400 feet long, the whole 9 yards. They're newly created. It's a small handful of older ones where roads were platted over top of longstanding driveways, things like Burnside Drive. There just aren't a lot of these situations.
Yeah, I think we might be trying to solve for something that's more of the 20% versus the 80, if even it's, or more of the 2% versus 98.
Chris Austin?
It sounds like this might just come down to a vote and making a decision. So because of that, I'll make a motion to remove the private road restriction for the accessory dwelling units.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second it.
Seconded. Planning Board Member Sykes?
Okay. Scott Taylor,
Aye.
Jen Sykes,
Aye.
Elise Polly,
Aye.
Chris Johnston,
Nay.
Lisa Frazier,
Aye.
Frank, we lost Frank. Chris Austin.
Aye.
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 6, 5-1.
Perfect. All right, so we have our.
Oh, wait, hold on.
Frank technically votes in the affirmative, I think.
Frank is coming back.
I don't think this
Frank.
is going to sway our vote, but
Yeah. Aye. Can you hear me?
yeah,
Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay.
So the motion on the floor, if you missed it, was to recommend approval of the text amendment, which would remove the requirement for public road access for accessory dwelling units within a principal structure.
Yeah, I caught that last part. Thank you. I've resurrected a very old laptop.
Did you aye or nay?
I eyed.
Okay.
Ayed. Okay,
I saw you nayed, Chris. Yes.
that's okay.
Yeah, I got that part.
The beauty of democracy, right?
Yeah.
All right, so we have our motion and recommendation. Samantha, I really appreciate you being here for this and working with us to go through the whole process. I know it probably seems like this all takes a long time and that sort of thing, but we really appreciate you bringing forward these amendments. So,
And
Margaret?
just before she leaves, the planning board will receive this at their June meeting, which is the second Monday, which if I'm not mistaken is the 14th of June. And then that will be the final action.
Sounds good. Thank you guys for your time. We appreciate it. Woohoo! We're
Thanks so
excited.
much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. We appreciate
Have
it.
a great night, y'all.
Yeah, have a good
Good
night.
night.
Okay, so we are now on to 4B, which is a combination of non-conforming lots. And because of the people who are bringing it, unfortunately, I do need to ask to be recused once more. So
Move to recuse Chris Johnston.
Second.
Chris Austin,
Aye.
Frank Casadante,
Aye.
Lisa Frazier,
Aye.
Elise Polly,
Aye.
Jen Sykes,
Aye.
and Scott Taylor.
Aye.
Great, that's unanimous. Thank you. And Jen will take over kind of
Great.
chairing for
All
brief
right, we are
minute.
now up to item 4B. Recombining language to modify how non-conforming lots that are undeveloped can be combined together. And Margaret, is there anything else to add here?
No, the outcome of this would limit the circumstances under which adjoining non-conforming lots need to be combined into less non-conforming lots. And basically it would move the standard from one of the lots has to be developed and the lots have to be 50 feet wide to just that the lots have to be 40 feet wide. So it provides a little bit more flexibility. And hopefully allows, and in this, oh, I guess I should bring Richard in. Sorry. Not doing my job here, people, sorry. So Richard Turlington from Habitat is here, and this just provides some more flexibility to Habitat, which is why they came and asked to move this forward. There really isn't a lot of vacant lots left in town that were platted out in small increments. So I'm not really sure that this will have a huge impact.
Does anybody have anything on this? I know I did, but Margaret clarified it at the public hearing for me. Seeing no movements of heads or hands, does anyone have a motion to send this on to the town board as is? Normally I would do something like this at this point, but I can't do that. All right, Lisa.
I make a motion that we send this to the town board as is.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, Margaret, come on down for the roll call.
Chris Austin.
Aye.
Frank Casadante.
Aye.
Lisa Frazier.
Aye.
Elise Polly.
Aye.
Jen Sykes.
Aye.
And Scott Taylor.
Aye.
And that would be unanimous.
All right, thanks everybody. And Chris Johnston, you can come on back in, and I can go back to being super opinionated and all that jazz.
And Richard, thanks for being here. I'll turn you loose, and we'll talk to you later.
Thank you all.
Great. The speed at which we went through 4B versus 4A makes me feel like I'm the problem here. So, all right, so we're going to go into 4C, the permitted use table. I love, Margaret, on page 28, there was little discussion of this item. So, so now we need to come up with a recommendation of the town board for action on this request. And based on our previous discussions, does anyone have anything that they saw in this table that has been changed and they didn't expect it, or have concerns, or?
The only thing I will throw in is Margaret did go over this in the next item with the Board of Adjustment. On this one, they didn't really have anything to say other than that in tandem with the next item, they were gonna go review it more thoroughly, but they didn't have any, and she went through it with them and no one had really strong opinions on it. We explained it. So yeah, I know one of the asks was to get the Board of Adjustment to review this in the next item. They did. This is one they didn't have any concerns with, other than they need to educate themselves. I mean, educate. I did not mean to use Simpsons speak.
It's okay. That's okay. It's all right. It's not like it's being recorded live on YouTube. So now we need to, if that's the case, so it sounds like Board of Adjustments has taken a look at it and not seen any kind of glaring issues. Margaret, do you have any changes, any last minute twists?
Not so much a last minute twist, but something we kind of glossed over was the one cell that I have highlighted in yellow, the building and trade contractors' offices. In the definition of that use, we say that they cannot have outside storage unless they're in a district where outside storage is allowed by right. In some ways that defeats the purpose of having certain types of trade offices. And I didn't know whether the board wanted to talk about possibly amending the definition to take out that provision and just say that, this is something that is a normal accessory part of this use. Not everybody has this, but many trade contractors are going to have some level of outside storage, and so long as they meet the requirements for what outside storage looks like, do we care?
I care.
Do you want to expand on that just a little bit? Or
Yeah, I mean, from a contractor standpoint, we're constantly needing outside storage for different parts, pieces, leftover parts of jobs. So I agree that having a limitation as to what we can store out there, but being able to have the ability to store is a good thing to have.
Okay. An expert in the field. Planning board member Sykes.
I think my only question is, I know that the setbacks and the buffers on some of these between uses are pretty big, but I just want to, I think neighborhood business and the EDD and business park are the only two I'm not, where they would likely adjoin to something kind of residentially, and just wanted to confirm what the setbacks on those were. Are they the really big buffer and the 50 and like the big one, or could it be 10 feet?
Okay, just didn't want all that flipping paper to go out over the over the microphone. So when let me just check. So neighborhood business adjacent to residential must observe a 15-foot setback, and EDD is 25 feet, industrial are 50, high intensity and general commercial are 30, from 20 and 30, depending on how big the zoning district is. And then the buffer requirements are, and we would treat storage as, you know, storage needs to meet a setback. You can't just throw it out there. When you have neighborhood business adjacent to residential, there's a type A buffer. Type A buffers can be anywhere from 10 to 15 feet. So basically the setback is going to be your buffer. Business park and EDD have type B and C buffers adjacent to residential. So that's wider. That's 15 to 40 feet in width, even up to 60 feet in width, depending on how they intend to plan it. So I think that's a fair amount of separation for inanimate storage.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'm thinking of is if they've got like the giant tractor and it's the first thing you see in the morning when you look outside your kitchen window. That's the only one.
Yeah, the giant tractor is going to be more like parking and not storage.
Yeah, but something like that, the pipes, whatever. The only reason I'm thinking of it is, I swear to God, I think on Millstone, something tried to build indoor storage for this purpose. I'm not 100% sure, but I remember seeing one of those things inside a building. But I mean, I don't think we have a whole lot of these in neighborhood business. The buffer, the setbacks seem pretty far off anyway. I don't think they're going to be able to pile it 50 feet high. But I'll defer to Scott to tell me if I'm wrong about that theory or not.
We can stack it pretty high.
So Margaret, this was added in at some point in the past, either when it was created this way or added in to address an issue. Was there an issue that it was trying to address when we added these in, the outside storage?
No, it was added in when the use was added to the district to try as a permitted use table district, because this use didn't used to exist, and we struggled with how to classify these uses when builders came in, or a plumber or an HVAC service guy. We didn't know what the use was until we actually called it out as its own use. And then we've always been skittish about outdoor storage here because we have had some previous uses that no longer exist that were pretty blatant about their outside storage. And it was truly unattractive. And so we haven't had a lot of requests for outside storage, but honestly, the standard for outside storage in the ordinance is really pretty good, and requires it to, I think, be behind the building and screened from the property. So
Okay.
I think the screening, I think, is the solution to a fair number of those setback buffer issues.
Elise, do you have any input, any thoughts?
Not too many thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah. Nothing much to add to what's been said already.
All right. Lisa, anything?
No.
Good. Frank?
No, I think I don't know if as long as the storage side of it meets guidelines, I'm okay with what's stored, and I think most folks are self-policing.
Okay.
So I think that I have no desire to like sort of mandate how it could be stored. I think that'd be a nightmare to enforce.
Okay. Chris?
No strong feelings.
Okay.
So just to quickly run through the standards for outside storage, located behind the building, screened from adjacent property in the public right-of-way with a solid screen at least 6 feet in height. So obviously things could get stacked taller than that, but solid screens have to be a combination of fences, walls, vegetation, topographic change, berms. Fences and walls have to be opaque. Vegetation must be kept in healthy condition. It can't be anything that's determined to be solid waste as defined under the town code. No hazardous materials, unless it's somehow regulated. So like if somebody has a diesel tank for their vehicles that are part of their business, that's acceptable, but they can't stack up their batteries, their vehicle batteries, just because they're too lazy to take them for hazardous waste recycling. And that they have to tell us exactly where the outside storage is and define it on the site plan so that it can't creep around on the site. So, I think we've eliminated a lot of the non-conforming outside storage that we have. So now we're starting from scratch in a position where folks don't have any legal non-conforming status. And that's always a better place to start from.
So not hearing any issues with that particular change, but also knowing that that's not really the motion we're going for here. Can I get just a nod if everyone's okay with this change? Just a quick nod. I've been a lot of nods. Okay. All right. So then we need an actual permitted use table recommendation for the town board.
Move to send the permitted use table with the amendment for outside storage and building and trade to the town board.
Perfect. Okay. Second?
Second that.
Okay, I got Elise.
Chris Austin.
Aye.
Frank Casadante.
Aye.
Lisa Frazier.
Aye.
Chris Johnston.
Aye.
Elise Polly.
Aye.
Jen Sykes.
Aye.
Scott Taylor.
Aye.
Great, that is unanimous. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, on to the fun one. 4D, assigning special use permit approval to the Board of Adjustment. So reading through this, it sounds like there was a discussion with the Board of Adjustments on this policy and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I spent some time talking with the Board of Adjustment. I guess it was just last week, right before your packets came out. And they kicked it around for a while and spent some time talking about, do they need to learn new things? Do they need to understand something different? Do they understand what's meant? And I think I tried to actually put almost word for word exactly what the chair ended up saying at the end of the discussion, because I thought he did such a great job summarizing their discussion and sharing their concerns. I also asked them to talk specifically about the extra materials, the extra items that we had been receiving for special use permits, you know, the affordable housing and the water use and green standards and cultural resources. And I, you know, the document, the language that's in the packet is really almost word for word what the chairman said and that the board members agreed to. So I think they understand what's going on and seem very willing to do the work. And I think they would really prefer to not see those extra 4 pieces of information unless or until there are guiding documents and standards that help them enforce it. That members of the Board of Adjustment tend to be a little bit more cut and dry. They read the ordinance and they apply it. And so if there's not a standard for them to go back to look at, they're very uncomfortable, as they should be, because I mean, that's their job. That's the way the law intends it to operate. And so I would say if this board still feels like some of those items are important, we can find another way to get that information. Either we craft standards that get adopted and then the Board of Adjustment can do it, or we find a way to get some of those policy discussions in front of the town board. And I'm open to finding ways to do either one, because I'm convinced we can do it, because I think we can do everything. But I think the Board of Adjustment kind of summed up their concerns really well.
Okay. Jen, do you want to give any additional input?
I would say, yeah, I would say the overall sentiment is to get a standard in. And there's some strength of feeling about wanting to get the town board to craft some of that through a vehicle like the comprehensive plan or something to give something to measure against. But a couple of members, and obviously self-included, were pretty strong on still wanting to have some sort of vehicle to address some of the equity questions, for lack of a better description, either through the town writes something, and it's got to be the town board side, or something has to come. Some of the uses might change. I think the easier way is the town can pretty quickly craft a statement of values or something to go against. I'm pretty sure it already exists somewhere.
Okay. Margaret, could you talk a little bit more about this? So the board was evenly split on this item with 3 members on each side. In regards to which question specifically, the crafting versus the, okay.
Yeah, it was really about the special issue. Some of the board was, you know, all of you are volunteers. The Board of Adjustment is full of volunteers. It's great to, I'm sure, yeah, I'm not a volunteer, so I'm not sure. So I'm assuming I know how you guys feel. That kind of the power and authority that comes with being on a board, not to say anybody's power hungry, that's not what I mean, but having that ability to influence what your community looks like and how it develops is kind of what drives y'all. And so some of the board members were like, yeah, we can do that. We can do these extra things. Just give us some guidance. And then some of the other ones were like, oh, wait. We're the very much read it and apply it board. We're a little hesitant. Well, maybe if you gave us some standards, then we could apply it. And so that's kind of where they were on that. And in the fullness of discussion, I think each person saw the other side and could understand. It wasn't like it was there was no brawl about to happen had we been in person. It was a very congenial conversation and very much, yeah, okay, I see your point. I can see why you feel that way. And yeah, I can see your point. And yeah, that would be great if we could do that. And but kind of that first blush of thought was, you know, some was like yes and some were no. And
Yeah, and I do think though the general idea is it would be nice if the town would come up with some kind of like vision. I think my notes, I have that the comprehensive plan is probably the easiest place to hide this in.
well, and I think the new comprehensive sustainability plan is going to address a wide number of these topics. And that's where it really ought to be. And then the board would be able to apply some of those. There was something else I was going to see, but I see Bob's unmuted himself, so I'm going to be quiet.
I was just going to say that the Board of Adjustment just isn't quite as freewheeling as this board is, you know, but I'm joking. But I think that it's true that the kind of the four nebulous topics that, you know, we were talking about with the Board of Adjustment all can be addressed in the comprehensive plan and are to some extent or another. But, you know, one of the standards for a special use permit is the use consistent with the comprehensive plan and approved plans of the town. So, you know, indirectly, the Board of Adjustment will be able to consider those issues. I think they'll feel more comfortable if they're told they have to consider those issues, that it somehow be the standards by which they need to be measured are somehow defined for them. I think that's where their hang up was. It's not with addressing the issues, but making sure there's some kind of standard to be applied and not just an arbitrary consideration.
Okay.
And the members were very clear that they felt like the items were important and they didn't want anybody to think they didn't think the topics were important. They just wanted more guidance before they were in the position of having to make decisions.
Okay. So in regards to formulating a town board action item regarding the special use permit approval going to the Board of Adjustments and then formulating a action plan for the town board, suggestion per the Board of Adjustments. Does anyone have any kind of thoughts, motions, anything along those lines?
Like I said, I think the board was fine with the bulk of it. It's the one thing that the town needs to get from the minutes of that meeting and this meeting is the town needs to move a little bit faster on those 4 questions than they might be planning to.
Is it some? Sorry,
the 4, like, I think like 3 of them are around like green building standards and environmental stuff, and 1 is affordable housing. And I know the bulk of them fall under the sustainability plan. I'm not sure how affordable housing fits with those plans yet, but the town will want to put something in the comprehensive plan sooner rather than later, meaning they might need to do some items before July 1st on that front.
I would offer that that's not possible and that what we do instead is take these 4 standards out of the ordinance and put them back in when the standards have been crafted.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
I appreciate Jen's enthusiasm, but that is just not possible. We are going to do a very engaged outreach process for the comprehensive plan so that because too many times we have picked a standard and it's been the wrong standard. And so this time we are going to hopefully do it right, especially since I'm not in charge of it. It's more likely to be right. And roll out something that is well thought out and well vetted and widely informed. And then we can put the right standards back in the ordinance.
Frank, you got your hand up?
Yeah, so we're just asking then for the motion is to remove these 4 essentially until a comprehensive plan can be adopted and then reinserted. Is that really where we're going at this point?
Yeah, it would be to recommend the bundle of amendments to send special use permits to the Board of Adjustment, but to exclude those four special items for future bring back.
But future is sort of boundless right now. We don't know when. Okay.
I think it futures as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, the big risk is in August, the Board of Adjustment can hear something where a building can come in and be as much of a polluter as possible within current ordinance guidelines. I don't think anybody in the town wants that, but there's no mechanism to prevent that. That's your risk, and that's the trade-off to consider.
A polluter, Jen?
I'm trying to come up with something about the green building stuff.
Well, I mean, the state building code addresses some of that. I honestly think we're reasonably well protected until the plan gets adopted in about 18 months, because any large tract of land that comes in is going to have an annexation component. And when it is being annexed and zoned, you all in the town board will see it. And there's ample opportunity at that point through the legislative process to put some conditions on it. I think we're reasonably well protected. I appreciate you looking for the loopholes, because you're good at that.
I'm just like, and I'm like, what is an example? I'm just trying to think of like something with, I'm unfortunately thinking of Victorian smokestacks, when what I mean is like the giant steam pumping air conditioning unit.
But I think the Buc-ee's proposal was an example of people, having been intimately involved in that deal, that, it was a rezoning, and, you could say it was grassroots that maybe prevented that, and just the pullout that happened. But I mean, there was significant pushback on that proposal at a grassroots level.
Well, and that's probably a good example of where I still have no idea how that would have passed any environmental regulation. And that's the kind of loophole that might come up. But that's what, again, I still think there may be some, the Board of Adjustment, I will say, having been on it, Bill is very good at finding creative solutions and getting compromise out. So from just understanding the dynamics of that board, I'm not practically worried. I trained in risk management in my first real job, so that's where my brain always goes to.
Okay. So it sounds like we've got a motion here under the waves. Does anyone want to put it together? Frank, you were like 3/4 of the way there, man.
Okay. Let's see. I move all, changes forward, with the exception of the 4 that had been cited in this discussion. And I'll defer to Margaret as far as to name those 4.
Okay. And then I think I heard Elise with the second.
Yep, second. Intended a second.
Right. Okay.
Great. Just for the record, that's the cultural resources, green building, water use, and affordable housing, which we will come back to once the comprehensive plan is completed. So Scott Taylor.
Aye.
Jen Sykes.
Aye.
Elise Polly.
Aye.
Chris Johnston.
Aye.
Lisa Frazier.
Aye.
Frank Casadante.
Aye.
Chris Austin.
Aye.
Great. That's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Okay. So now we're on 4E, Unified Development Ordinance amendments, the entire Unified Development Ordinance to comply with NCGS 160D. What would we like to talk to tonight? Margaret.
I can go through as much of this as the board wants. You know, again, I feel like I've been droning on about this. To eliminate special use zoning, go with and eliminate the concept of a conditional use permit, switch everything to a special use permit. We're adding some language about ethics for both board members and staff. We are proposing that the creation of new lots up to 19 would actually be a staff level review. And then at 20, it becomes the special use permit. There really aren't a lot of substantive changes. A lot of it is just language and calling out that certain hearing types are administrative, certain hearings are legislative. Legislative ones are the ones that come to this board and the town board in that quarterly hearing process. That's the rezonings. If we put in conditional zoning districts, those will also be come to this board. And then the evidentiary hearings are the ones that go to the Board of Adjustment and the Historic District Commission. Appeals of the Historic District Commission would go straight to court rather than to the Board of Adjustment. And that really kind of sums it up. Cleaning up the language, going to clean up the format. I've been watching YouTube videos to figure out how to make Word behave itself and set up multi-level lists for myself and format. So I'm trying to clean that up so it's a little bit more consistent. And just do some of those things that drive me insane, like reading through an ordinance and one time the town board is capitalized and one time it's not. One time planning director is capitalized, one time it's not. And you know, those types of things just drive me insane. And with it being a 300-page document, it's really hard to capture all of those, but I'm going to do my best in the next 2 weeks.
And I think we need a vote on planning director being capitalized versus not capitalized. Needs to be discussed. Okay, so in regards to the changes, so I mean, we're recommending something to the town board right now based on the changes that we discussed at the previous meetings. Let's see, there was something I had.
Right, because the only changes that you haven't seen in the version that went out for public hearing are truly format. They will be format changes. It will be, you know, all boards and all staff are capitalized. It will be the outline number. So non-substantive, not changing the impact, using periods rather than semicolons when they're the right kind of list. Just, you know, everything that Word likes to outline with a double blue underline just drives me insane. I'm going to try and get rid of as many of those as I can. But it's not substantive changes. You're not turning me loose to just rewrite the ordinance however I want to. It's all very much formatting and Scrivener's error type things. Everything else you have seen and has been vetted at the public hearing.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions or concerns regarding the entire UDO? All 300 pages? In regards to the staff review for 19 units or fewer, I mean, is that standard for localities near us and that sort of thing? I mean, is that how we got to that number, or is that a number that we kind of pulled, or?
Well, initially the 20 units was based on actually our adequate public facilities ordinance for schools, and that a 20 unit subdivision could potentially trigger a classroom full of children. And so, which is more likely to have an impact and so on and so forth. And so that's where that magic originally came from. Given now what I've learned over the last 12 months or so about the fire code, I would eventually like to see us move that toward 30, because a lot of fire code limits come in at 30 in terms of 2 points of access, how well the fire road has to be constructed, and those types of things. And, you know, really it's, when you're talking about creating a new residential subdivision, it's not really how the subdivision itself is laid out. It's how does it connect to the existing community? It's where are those points of access? Where are those driveways? what is it, you know, yes, sometimes it's individual driveways on an existing road, but it's where do those roads come out? That's what people care about. And so when you're talking about having multiple of those, there is a much greater need for a public conversation about those connection points and what it's going to mean to roads and so forth. And so that's where I come from on that. That's, you know, my 2 cents. There's not any great rush on my part. I may not even get around to making that change while I'm still have a hand in the planning department. That may never come, or I may leave it in Shannon's hands. But right now we're at the 20, and that anything more than 20 would come for some sort of review that would involve neighbor notice.
Okay. Jen?
And see, I'm on the opposite end of leaving it as it is right now, because in part kind of what Margaret just said, where how does it fit into the community, and going up to 20 houses, even going up to 5 is a big change in a lot of the parcels that are available around here. And that's why it's my view of it is from, and kind of my other point I'll bring up later with this to that I have concerns with is about that notification of change for the community. Yes, they might not have any valid evidence to present, but you want to still foster that awareness for people and let them know what's going on. And I think that's just a tenet of good government. And that's why I would keep it there at the way we have it currently right now, looking at the 5 because of that community, the potential community impact.
Okay. So we have consideration of community impact in regards to the number of houses that are just by, right's not the right word I'm looking for, by staff review rather than review by a board. Does anyone have any feelings?
The one thing I'll add to it too is I think the infill piece, this is a little bit separate of it. I think you're going to see more of this kind of stuff come in through that infill zoning anyway. Per se, but you still, as the town changes, you want people to understand what's changing in the town. It might not go in their favor. They might not have valid evidence to present on it, but it's better to inform them, is my just little d Democrat belief.
Is it better to inform them if they have no say on what would happen on that particular lot?
They would, I am of the mindset, and this gets at my second point with some of the changes that are written out for notification and some of the changes away from the de facto 500 feet. I'm not in favor of that for the same reason. People have a right to be heard. The boards are responsible for whether or not to consider it. I think we've all agreed that Board of Adjustment might need, or some might need additional training, whatnot, but I still think the citizenry has a right to know, to potentially come to a hearing, speak, whether or not they can present credible evidence or not is the issue, but they have the right to know because they may opt to move with their feet or vote with their feet. They still have the right to be aware of what's going on around them, is my view.
Okay, Margaret?
I just need to be clear that the only process that we are changing the notification for is for a variance. Only.
Yep. The way it's actually written in one of the pages, it talks about the only people who would be able to testify are those who receive written notice, which my thought on that is around the historic district.
Well, there's a difference between having notice of the hearing and being the right to be a party in the hearing and to provide testimony.
Right,
And
that's where
and limiting it a little bit all has to do with those who are most likely to have legal standing, and it gets into a deep legalese kind of thing. But there's a reason for it.
Yes, and I understand that. I still would prefer to have the 500 person limit, and if people are concerned, it's up to the board to say, thanks for your testimony, but you don't have standing. People.
So Jen, let me, because I don't think we're communicating here, so I think I must be misunderstanding. Are you saying you want the 500-foot notice for more than 5 lots?
I would say my 2 pieces here are the 500 feet on the variance, keep that back in, even though I know Tom's comment was, they're not going to be as impacted, but I still think that's a better practice, even if it might not generate the most relevant pieces. And then as well, keep the 5 lots not under staff review, but under a hearing. And I might be in the minority on this, but I always would prefer to let people be aware, even if they might not have the standing to be engaged. I'd rather them be aware.
I would just throw out that we could do some other sort of notice to just let folks know that there's something being proposed, and that they could come by the office and look at it as an alternative, but it's as the board decides.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the big issue is that little d, get your citizenry involved, engaged. And again, we know a lot of change is coming. People are aware that change is coming, but I know I've personally tried my best to educate. I hope everyone on the boards has. I think in the end, it actually does make it easier on you as staff when they hear earlier rather than later. And again, this town, at least so far, has had a lot of times where the public and the private come together and come up with the solution themselves, which is exactly what you want to have happen. My biggest concern is on those notification points around those areas and making sure the public still has that even if they're not going to win, they still have the right to be heard.
Bob, you're shaking your head in.
Nodding his head about.
Some people, well, never mind. I'm not even going to say it.
Some people, I've been through them where we get some people talking and rambling, and as I'm doing now.
Right. You have the right to be heard as long as you have something valuable to contribute to the conversation.
Right. And if you get off topic, we know how to shut you down and tell you thanks, but we can't consider any of that.
Okay. Elise, you went off mute. Yep, there you go. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm processing all of this, and I have a lot of different thoughts around it, and I'm trying to bring them together. I agree that it's important for the people of the town of Hillsborough to be educated, to know what's coming, especially when it is close to their house and close to the place where they live. And so I think it's important to come up with, if there are going to be shifts there, I appreciate that Margaret volunteered that there might be other opportunities to alert people and say, come on into the office, we'll show you, and we'll talk about it. One of the things that has stood out to me during my time on the board is that when we do have these public hearings, people show up, and, I feel like when people are upset about something and do not support an idea, they come in and they speak to that, but it often, by the time something has gotten to that point where it's at a public hearing, and I'm thinking really around development right now, there have been so many discussions between the town and the developer, and they have crafted it in such a way that, I'll be honest, and sometimes it just kind of feels like a moot point and it's going to move forward anyway. I feel like it's really important for the citizens to be able to speak and to be heard, but I also feel like there's sort of this false sense of their ability to change the outcome if they show up, because I feel like often the outcome isn't changed after the public hearing, even when people show up and are strongly opposed. And so I struggle with that because I'm not sure. I want people to be engaged. I want people to know what's happening. And I want people to be able to contribute to the vision for the town of Hillsborough. But in order to really do that, they need to come in much earlier in the process. And there's no, when things first start, when those conversations first start, I mean, actually, Jen, you did say that the earlier people could be alerted, the better. I'm just trying to think through how we can set this up in a way so that the citizens can speak and be heard, but that there actually is some opportunity for them to adjust the outcome rather than just saying, we're having a public hearing, come tell us what you think. Chances are things have already moved forward enough that it's not going to change. I don't know. There's a balance there, and I don't know where to land.
And I think one thing Margaret had at one point on the table was somehow getting the developers to do public input meeting during part of that planning review. I think that came up at one point as some idea somebody had, because that's probably your optimal solution even for the subdivision question, is getting developers to agree to meet with the public somehow.
Just to clarify though, so what we're talking about is when developers come in for a special use permit or some change or something like that, that's when folks get notified. Is that correct? Because then by right, a developer gets to come in and do whatever a developer can do within a particular zone. And the neighbors are only getting notified when there's some sort of variance or some sort of special use or something to that effect. Is that correct?
The neighbors receive a notice if there is a rezoning, if there is a special use permit, or if there is a variance.
Right.
So yes, you are exactly right. And it is difficult to get people to really, because the threshold of information that is submitted with a standard rezoning, which is where the board can have the most impact, the threshold is so low that it's hard to get people excited about it, to get them to come to the public hearing at that point when they can have the most input and talk about, what the impacts are going to be to them, because it's just this amorphous change of suddenly this land behind me can be, five houses or 25 houses. Well, that's kind of hard to understand versus a drawn plan that shows the driveways here and the houses here and that they're going to be like this and so on and so forth. That's what you get at the special use permit. And unfortunately, when it's a special use permit, then the comment has to be that substantial competent evidence, not I don't like this. The I don't like this comment has to be on the legislative side, at the rezoning side earlier in the process. And so if the land is already zoned and the person does not need a rezoning to do what they want, it is very difficult to deal with the I don't want this, because that property owner is entitled to build it. But when there's a rezoning and they want something more than what they're currently allowed, or there's a special use permit, then it works a little bit better. But it's a tough, been doing this a long time. It's a tough thing to noodle out, to figure out where is the right place for the input and when is the input the most impactful and helpful.
Having tried to get people on a rezoning one where it was just a rezoning, people were so confused by that. But we all know the optimal solution is probably like doing public interest meetings between developers and neighbors, doing neighborhood meetings on some of, and it sounds like with what'll stay going to the town and planning boards, I think you were talking about trying to encourage that process as part of those kinds of applications, Margaret, because of that issue. I think anything that's going to be, I think the only example that isn't covered, that won't be covered with a rezoning for more intense use, is that subdivision example.
Okay. So we've gotten into the weeds a little bit on alerting public for variances and alerting public for special use permits and that sort of thing, and the language around that. It sounds like we're all in agreement that we want people to be aware, but we need to know when's the right time to make them aware. and how to get that information to them.
Well, I mean, we know that by law, the time to make them aware is within a certain number of days prior to a public hearing. Now, you know, and I think the only notice we're changing is the one for the variance, right, Margaret? So otherwise we're staying the same. So I want to make sure we all understand the only town of Hillsborough notice standard or requirement we're proposing to change anyway is the one for the variance.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Okay. Then there was the second part. Oh, the 5 units versus 20 units versus whatever the case may be. So we've heard Jen's point on board approval versus having staff be able to go through and that sort of thing. Does anyone have any strong feelings in regards to the 5 and 20 and how that'll affect the character of the town versus who's being represented versus who's getting final say on differing sizes of development? Chris Austin?
I would say I'm in favor of Margaret's proposal for 20. I think the point being, if developers or whomever owns it, then they have the right to do what they want with the property. If there's nothing that can be done, I think I would prefer that the board puts more input into designing the standards or creating the standards that we want to see in the future, and relying and trusting on the town management to execute on that. So.
Okay. Solid answer. Scott?
I'm in agreement with Chris. I like his answer.
Okay. Lisa, Elise, anything? Frank, any changes?
No,
okay.
None.
I think what we need to do is some sort of, because it sounds like we might have some debate or a discussion or something along those lines in regards to the 5 to 20, but I don't think that's actually a vote or anything along those lines. What do we need to, so I guess we need a motion for the sending the recommendation to town board for the UDO changes. And then the motion needs to include whether it's 20 for staff or 5.
I mean, you could pull it out and vote it separate if you want. You could pull out the notice and vote it separate if you want, or you could vote on the whole thing and then provide some commentary about these are the areas where there was not unanimous support, and you know, there are options on how to go forward. They could be solved now, they could be solved in the next public hearing round, and provide some options and guidance.
Okay, thank you. Sykes, Jen Sykes.
The one thing about the notice I just want to go back to, so in the April packet on page 51, it's section 3.8.10. And this is where I just want to clarify this. It says, the second paragraph, the evidentiary hearing on special use permit application shall be a quasi-judicial hearing open to the public. At the hearing, the applicant and property owners receiving written notices shall be given the opportunity to present evidence and arguments and to ask questions. And that was one of the things I brought up earlier, just that limits standing. I understand where you're coming from a legal standpoint. My question is, for something in like the historic district, would that, if you're still doing the 500-foot notice piece, would the chair of the historic commission be able to testify if he or she didn't live inside that 500-foot notice piece? Because I think that's where you don't want to restrict it that much to the written notice only piece in a situation like that.
Well, I just put, if it's something in the historic district, there's still a requirement, Margaret, do we still have the requirement that items requiring a special use permit in the historic district have to be reviewed by the HDC for commentary?
Yeah. Okay, so that's where I'm trying to figure that one out, because to me that might, I can see that situation and the written hearing notice, people only being allowed to testify being an issue. But I can also see, say, I'm just going to name names here. We all know Tom Magnuson knows a lot of history about the town. I'm assuming somebody with a written notice can relay his testimony about some kind of historic feature on a property.
Well, there's also the question of, yes, that's what the ordinance says, but when has the board ever required somebody to produce their written notice prior to allowing them to testify? I mean, this town has a long history of allowing anyone who shows up to testify. Now, that's not to say that that won't change with future people and so forth, but just like folks who live in the ETJ wonder whether they get adequate representation, I would argue that the town boards that we've had for the last 20 or 30 years listen just as much to someone who votes for them as they do to someone who doesn't. That's an operational thing that, yes, the ordinance says one thing, but how it gets handled in real life is often rather different.
So at this point, I think we are ready to entertain some sort of motion. Either let's take out the parts that we're having a discussion about, or let's do it all at once. Just someone to pull the motion trigger.
Motion to put forward the amendments as stated.
Okay, so that includes the changes and variants and notifications, and also the 20 count for the staff to 20 count housing for, or excuse me, 19 and below staff has approval process on housing or houses, that kind of thing. Correct?
That's what I understand.
Perfect. Okay. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, seconded by Scott Taylor, moved by Chris Austin.
Chris Austin,
Aye.
Frank Casadante,
Aye.
Lisa Frazier,
Aye.
Chris Johnston,
Aye.
Elise Polly,
Aye.
Jen Sykes,
Nay.
Scott Taylor.
Aye.
Okay, 6-1.
What Chris Austin just did, because I used to study congressional voting procedure, is he didn't want me to bog you down with something called an amendment tree. Excellent parliamentary move.
I don't think I know.
I watched a lot of C-SPAN, I guess. I don't know.
I actually studied this for a very long time.
Okay. I have lost my place. Hold on one second. I swear I had it. So we are now all done with 4. That's it. We made it through 4. Great. We are now in 5A, discussion, Unified Development Ordinance, conditional zoning.
Well, if I can just take a minute, one, thank you all for getting through all that and keeping us on track to be on time. But we do have 2 volunteers with us who are interested in serving on the planning board. And with your permission, I would like to bring them in. And then also ask the board, it is 8:45. We have time to continue to work on these 2 text amendments that are items 5A and B prior to the July public hearing. If you would rather spend some time talking with 2 folks who might want to serve on this board, or wading into those meaty topics, I am completely flexible if you would rather do one or the other. But in the meantime, I am going to bring these folks in and hopefully bring Shannon in with us. And no, for some reason, I just cannot bring Shannon in. Sorry, Shannon, you're just stuck in the audience. So we have with us Patrick Cummings and Cassie Chandler, 2 folks who have expressed interest through our website in filling some vacancies on the board. We do have a current vacancy. I think folks know that Toby is no longer with us. And in December, we will also lose Jen Sykes. And actually in October, we will also lose Lisa. but Lisa is an ETJ member, and we are talking to some folks in the ETJ about taking her seat on. But I've spent some time talking to both Cassie and Patrick, and I believe Shannon has as well. I might jump ahead to the updates just briefly. So you all have heard me say a million times, oh, here comes Shannon. Somehow it worked. I am going to retire when I turn 55. That's in 2 years. So don't anybody panic. But because so much of what's happened in this department in the last 30 years is stuck in my head, and the easiest way to transfer that is to let people kind of live through it. We're working toward a kind of long transition period where I shift to be more assistant town manager more of the time and less planning director. And the thought right now is that Shannon would join us as the planning manager and take over a lot of my responsibilities. There wouldn't be a planning director. It's a word thing. I mean, it's not, her responsibilities would be exactly the same. She would basically be doing my job, but we're going to have a lot of folks at the manager level rather than department level. It's a word and management thing. It doesn't really mean a difference. So part of this is starting to get the board members used to working with Shannon. Of course, if she decides after she's here that this is not what she wants, we have plenty of time to then go find a planning director. But Shannon has been with the town for what, 5 years? 5 or 6 years, and came with a lot of experience in other places. So I feel very comfortable that she has a lot of background that I didn't have when I started. And she shared an office with me for a couple of years and learned through osmosis a lot of things. I'm going to shut up here in just a second and let the board members tell me whether they want to have a conversation with our volunteers or let us wade into these 2 meaty topics and just kind of invite a little extra participation.
One of the things that was mentioned was the change in time for the meetings. And
oh yes, that's something Elise asked. So jumping ahead to updates, so we'll put a pause on items 5A and B for a second. Elise had contacted me about changing the meeting start time, and I kind of left that dangling on the agenda without any more information than that. So maybe if Elise wants to go ahead and talk about that, I'll again be quiet.
Sure, happy to. I had just asked Margaret about the reasoning for starting our meetings at 7 o'clock. I don't know about everyone else, but I noticed that for myself, as the meetings go on, I feel like right around 8 o'clock, I definitely get more tired, and I look around and I see people get more tired. I've also noticed that the amount of interaction and conversation over the course of these meetings starts to go down around 8 or 8:30. And you know, each meeting is a little bit different. Some of them are longer than others. But I'm curious because there are other board meetings that happen at 5:30. I think there are actually even some that happen during the day. Margaret clarified to me that the time that we choose to meet as a board is up to us as a board. So I just wanted to bring this up and see how other people feel about it. I don't know if folks have strong opinions in either direction. I'll go ahead and voice my opinion, which is that I would really love to meet earlier than 7. It's pretty late for me. I think I would have more to contribute. I think my brain would be a little bit more sharp, and I'd be a little bit more participatory than I am from a 7 to 8, 9, 10 o'clock meeting. If it were like a 5:30 to, and I'm throwing 5:30 out as a starting place, but 6, you know, whatever it is that we decide, or if we all decide to stay with 7, of course, that's a possibility as well. But I did just want to bring this up and check in with folks and see how you all feel about starting these meetings at 7 o'clock.
Jen?
I work and I have to start going back into the office. I can't meet before 7.
Jen, you're going to be with us until when? December?
But I don't think I'm the only person with that problem.
Sure.
And I think that's why the town does a lot of them at 7 o'clock. The ones that I know meet at 5:30 are like the tourism board, which is made of people who live or work in town. But commuting and work for a lot of us, I think when we all start having to go back in, 7 is about the only time available.
Chris?
I work, but I also wake up at 4:30, so I can be flexible with my work schedule enough to move it up to 6 or 6:30, and would appreciate moving it earlier as well, personally.
PM or AM?
4:30 a.m. So
Okay.
this is
Oh
late.
yeah, I'm in the office at 7:30, but yeah.
Okay. Lisa?
Well, personally, I don't get off work until 5:30 in Durham, and traffic, I couldn't do anything before 6 o'clock at all.
Okay. Scott?
I'm flexible. I mean, I'm in the office here at 7 o'clock in the morning, so
You're literally in the office right now, so.
I am in the office still. I mean, this is normal for me. But yeah, I mean, if it works out to where we need to do them earlier, I'm fine with that.
Frank?
Yeah, I'm flexible as well. I can certainly do it earlier if need be. I work in town and live in town. So to Jen's point, like I don't have a commute issue. But I could start earlier. I agree with Elisa's sort of recommendation that we're less active, I think, after 8:30. But I could go either way. I could go earlier, 6 o'clock, 6:30, even a half hour start would be better, I think.
Okay. Yeah, to throw my voice in, it's late. It's late right now, right? With the whole 3-year-old bedtime kind of deal. So, and these meetings can definitely run long sometimes. So I guess my only concern is if we started earlier, would we actually end any earlier, or would we just, have longer meetings? So, yeah. So that would be my only concern there, is that then these would go to 5 hours, 6 hours, or whatever. But I do understand that we have people who are tied to work. Lisa and Jen, it sounds like you both have work hours that might be a little tough to meet. Jen, you're just a dead no on anything before 7.
I'm like 6:30 is maybe the earliest, and 2, like at least Lisa and I would probably benefit from eating beforehand too.
Okay.
Yeah, so 6:30 may be the earliest, but no, I'm in Durham also. The traffic can be a mess.
All right. So 6:30, and the meetings are now held at Jay's Chicken Shack. So, all right. So 6:30 sounds like the earliest that we. Oh, Frank, you got your hand?
And this may have been talked about while I was having technical difficulties, but is there an ETA when these meetings will move to in-person?
As soon as the governor ends the state of emergency. So I would say, and right now that runs through like the middle of June. I don't know whether he's going to release it in time for our June meeting. I would say definitely plan to be in person for the July public hearing. But it's a challenge, and I can understand from his perspective, he can't give a lot of notice, but it is really challenging.
So to confirm, when we go live in July, there won't be any opportunity for online participation by board members. Will be in person.
The minute the state of emergency expires, the ability to have a remote meeting goes away. So you could have public remote, but the board members who are participating will all need to be live in the room. No telephone, no Zoom.
Interesting.
When the state of emergency expires.
So folks, be aware of that particular change and your comfort level with being nearby people. So, okay, so let's try this. It sounds like we're having some issues with the lateness of the meetings and that sort of thing. It sounds like 6:30 might work. Why don't we try 6:30 for the next meeting and see how it goes and go from there? And if we hate it, or if we're having issues with a majority of our members not being able to make it or something along those lines, we can definitely reassess at a following meeting and go from there. Does that sound reasonable?
I agree.
Jen, Lisa, how do you feel about that? Because this is really going to affect you two.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with that time.
Okay, Jen?
I mean, that's about the earliest I think I could even do it.
Okay.
And I might be eating during the meeting.
Okay.
Just know, I've done that before.
I think that'd be probably perfectly fine. Yeah.
Well, I just have to throw in here that at your joint public hearings, I don't think we're going to be able to get the town board to come early. I
Right.
think those are going to have to remain at 7. So there'll be a little bit of back and forth until we can broach some sort of conversation with them. So at least for the July public hearing, plan on 7, and we can have that conversation at that point as well.
Okay. Thank you for the
Yeah, I
clarification.
think one town board member has a schedule quite similar to mine.
But-
Yeah, we've got one who will not come sooner than 7.
Okay. All right. So then on the next planning board only meeting, let's plan for a 6:30, do a trial run, see how we feel, and then go from there. Does that sound all right? All right, but I want 30 additional minutes of chatter at that point. So I think that's required at that point. All right, wonderful. So it looks like, and everyone push back if you feel this way or not, but Margaret, how bad would it be if we pushed off 5A, 5B until we were in the 6:30 land and do it that way?
I don't think it hurts at all. If anybody has thoughts, I mean, if you guys have been thinking about this, which, I think I'm the center of your world and that you don't think about anything except sitting here in these planning board meetings. So if you have thoughts about things that are important to you, I think we spent a lot of time talking about engagement, and I agree with that. But if folks have, I had a little bit more in the packet about conditional zoning and some kind of the preliminary suggestions. If folks have comments and just want to shoot me an email, that'd be great. If you have things that concern you about ending the waivers, I was going to tell you that we didn't quite get that study of the waivers done, so I wasn't going to have anything to talk about anyway. We've been busy doing other things. So we will definitely have that in June to be able to tell you kind of where the hot spots are. But if folks have things that you remember of, God, every time we see this waiver, it drives me nuts. Just shoot me an email. Help me make that conversation as useful and helpful as possible. At this very moment, I don't think we have anything much for the July public hearing. We do have one last lingering waiver request that is a discovered during construction problem that will have to come forward, but I'm not aware of any big rezonings or anything like that. Shannon, am I missing something?
I don't think so. We had a lot of interest in a lot of kind of scoping meetings, but I don't know that we had anyone make that deadline.
And we've also been letting folks know that these amendments were coming and that they might want to wait until the June board meeting and see whether they're going to a quarterly public hearing or to the Board of Adjustment before they actually submit their plan. So I think the Board of Adjustment might see a handful of special use permits the first go round, but I don't think this board is going to see. Our focus will still remain on the ordinance primarily.
Okay. Jen?
Just out of curiosity, is the waiver request out of Collins Ridge? Just because of what I keep hearing on the utility side.
It is not. It is not.
Okay.
No, they're not going to be able to waive their utility issues. That's not a waivable thing.
Oh yeah, no. I was just wondering if it was something else in there, given all the utility issues.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that being said, it sounds like we're going to go ahead and move through 5A, 5B, leave that for another time, which is great. We're now in update 6A, Board of Adjustment and Park and Recreation members. And then I would like to just do a quick afterwards, getting to know Patrick and Cassie. It's Cassie, right? Okay, wonderful. I'm sorry. I've been sitting here thinking it's Cassie, it's Cassie, it's Cassie. Okay, but yeah, I would like to do that at the end if that's particularly possible. So if you could bear with us for just a few more minutes, that'd be great. But yeah, updates, Board of Adjustments and Park and Recreation members. Do we have any updates?
Board, you guys heard the stuff about 160D. I did have one thing that came out that I would recommend for parks from when I read the ordinance, which is that points table might need to be reviewed. I don't think it's been reviewed for a couple of years. But when I read through it, I was like, oh yeah, I think we got 2 of those now. So that should probably be readjusted.
Okay. And then Parks and Rec. Who's our Parks and Rec? It's Lisa.
We did not have a meeting this month. We did last month, but due to family illnesses, I was not able to attend.
Okay. And then upcoming staff changes. Margaret, is that relations to your going to a beach in Tahiti somewhere?
Yeah, no, that's just that you'll start seeing Shannon a little bit more. I'll carry you through the July public hearing and get some of these ordinance wrapped up. But as we go into the fall, you're going to see a lot more Shannon and a lot less me. And you're in good hands. But I'm never far away if there's questions.
Wonderful. All right, with that, I'm going to throw in a 6C, which I think I was supposed to do at the beginning of the meeting, but I apologize, I did not do, which is we have Cassie and Patrick here, and if either one of you wants to say anything, just to introduce yourselves or anything along those lines, that'd be great. I really appreciate you sticking with us through a very long meeting, 2 hours at this point. But if there's anything that you want to say, introduce yourselves, anything like that, now's the time. So, and if not, that's fine too.
We can go alphabetically, Cassie, if you want to go first.
Somehow the name always puts me first. Well, it always has Cassandra up there, but everyone calls me Cassie. I've only lived here a little less than a year, and I'm here like desperately seeking Susan, trying to find a house, which has become almost impossible. But I love the area. I've lived in Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. area, and Virginia. So I'm very keen about new development and how important it is to do it right, and not come out to look like, you know, just a mass of subdivisions for this very beautiful town. So my heart is in that. I want you to know that. I'll be studying a lot like I see Jen doing. And I look very forward to, if I can, to work with you guys, because I think this is a beautiful place. I love it. I walk every day along the Eno River, and I wouldn't trade this place for anything. So love to keep it looking just the way it is and feeling just the way it feels. But I'm excited to work with you, and I want you to know that I will be doing a lot of research. My background is in intelligence and analytics and law enforcement and banking. So, and I currently own my own private company and kind of travel bits here and there.
Perfect.
Which part of Northern Virginia were you in?
Fairfax.
Okay, so I was in Vienna and Springfield.
Ah, well, so Fairfax, just so you'll know, Jen, when I moved to Fairfax, I lived on a subdivision in a cute little place surrounded by trees. And by the time I left, the subdivision were multiple subdivisions. There were no more trees, and I'm
the high rises
about that. Yeah.
Yep. I've seen Springfield compared to Vienna, and I know exactly what you're talking about.
Perfect. Thank you, Cassie. Patrick?
I feel like I should have gone first. I don't have intelligence, analytics, and banking in my resume. I feel like she's a spy or a ninja or something. So I am but a lowly civil engineer. It's nice to meet all of you. I know, or have had the occasion to know several of you. My wife and I and our kids have lived here in Hillsborough for coming up on 7 years. Continue to be active in the community on many volunteer opportunities. Like Cassie said, I care deeply for Hillsborough and helping shape how this little corner of paradise that we live in adjust to all that is going on around it, like billion-dollar buildings in Durham, which still continues to just blow my mind. I have the occasion to be a part of a lot of judicial, quasi-judicial planning meetings across the state and the region. Because of my job, I work for Summit here in town. And so I feel like I heard you talking candidly about neighborhood information meetings and how they're played in jurisdictions and how they might be helpful. And I thought to type into the panelists, but I didn't want to be a contributing civilian. So I held back for just a moment. But I look forward to participating on the board should that become an opportunity. I, like Cassie, care deeply. I'm sure Hillsborough maintains the character and disposition that it currently has as we adjust to all the triad and triangle pressures that are coming from both sides. So.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. I really appreciate you, like I said, sticking through to the end of the meeting. And it's just really great to have you. So with that.
Can I answer Lisa's question? Do you mind?
Oh yeah, go hit it.
Question. Yeah. So.
6:30, right?
Yeah.
Question about the. the neighborhood information meetings. It's a requirement in several jurisdictions for development projects. It eases the burden of public meetings that become, staff managed and community burdened, and the developers required to organize the meetings and host the meetings and house the meetings and, create an agenda for the meetings. And the municipality typically provides a recommended scope for the meetings and who to invite and when to invite. And to say that they're a benefit to the authority having jurisdiction is probably an understatement. So I'm not sure whether required or recommended is the path forward, but they are certainly beneficial to, I guess, take the informed or uninformed position discussions to those meetings and keep them out of the more formal review meetings, planning board, board of adjustment, or otherwise. So I recommend them. I think they'd be great for what we do here. And I think, as several of you said, I don't think there'll be any shortage of attendees. I've been to neighborhood information meetings across North Carolina where nobody shows up. I just don't think we're going to have that problem here in Hillsborough.
All right, I'm going to try something new here. Shannon, is that something we're working on here, or is that something that's in the cards, or what's your thoughts there?
I mean, community meetings can be a really good tool. I've seen them done very well, and I've seen them also done very poorly. So I think it's just coming up with the right formula. Where it's hosted is important, making sure that that's a public and accessible forum, making sure the developer is showing all their cards in the beginning, because I've seen them show kind of one thing at the community meeting and another thing once it gets to the board. So, I mean, I think that's something that we could definitely talk about in the future implementing.
Okay, that felt weird, but all right, that was good. All right, thank you, Shannon.
You can do it, Chris. I know you can.
All right, well, we'll get there. Wonderful. All right, well, with that, is there anything else that anyone wants to discuss before we adjourn? I'm not seeing anyone reach for their unmute button. All right, so I need someone for 7. Someone for 7.
Move adjourn.
I think Elise beat you this time, Jen. I think she beat. So we are adjourned. We don't need a second. Thank you all so much for another wonderful night. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Margaret, may I ask a quick question to you?
Yes.
And to Shannon, I'm just curious, will there be another economic developer for the town of Hillsborough as part of that transition? I'm a big proponent of economic development, so I just was curious. I love that our town has had that focus. Is that still?
And I don't know.
I will be every woman. It's all in me.
It's all in you. You're going to be oh my goodness, you're going to be so busy. I'm excited to work with you.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really good though. I'm currently doing economic development and tourism, but before that, I was a city planner in both Raleigh and in Morrisville. In Morrisville during its big boom when we jumped from like 10,000 to 20,000 people. So I think it'll be good. It'll be a lot, but it'll be good.
Yeah.
Shannon, good luck. I feel like I see you everywhere I go now, and it feels like it's going to happen more often. So Godspeed. Good luck.
Great. Thank you.
Good night,
Bye.